Last week, XRP did something that left my heart pounding. It plunged nearly 50% overnight. Now, I was this close to just smashing that sell button on my entire bag, until I stumbled on a hidden clue that completely changed my mind. Now, let me just rewind a little bit here, because one moment I was relaxing, thinking my XRP holdings were safe. And then the next thing, my phone lit up with at least a Christmas tree with price alerts. Now that sudden crash had me, and just about every XRP holder, asking the very same question. Should we hold on for dear life or cut our losses before things get worse? The date was October 10th, and XRP went into a freefall out of nowhere. We dropped from around $2.80 to $1.53 in just a blink of an eye. Just imagine that. Almost half of the value gone while you were probably just brushing your teeth or watching TV. Now, by the time I had scrambled to check again, it had bounced back near to $2.50. But that was still roughly 10% lower than we were before the crash. Talk about a bit of a roller coaster of a ride. Now, I'm sitting here, just staring at the screen, and I bet that a lot of you were probably doing the same thing and thinking, what do we do now? Well, the whole community basically split into kind of two camps here. One side was yelling, hold on, we will recover. And the other side were going, no, I'm getting out before it drops even more. And it was all over Twitter, forums, and of course our own Discord server. So yes, we do have a free educational Discord, and it is linked in the description. But people were debating this non-stop, right? It was kind of like half the crowd was screaming hodl, and the other half were saying save yourselves, it's about to get even worse. Now, right in the middle of all of this frenzy, I came across an analysis by a market watcher who goes by the name of 𝗗𝗗𝗃. Now, maybe some of you even follow him. He's known for detailed XRP charts, and he basically stepped in to answer the big hodl or sell dilemma. Now, 𝗗𝗃𝗃 pointed out exactly what we are all feeling. Some XRP investors are in it for the longer haul, like thinking 10 years down the line, and at least aren't even sweating all of this little stuff, while others are obsessing over every short-term price tick. Now, he said, if you're one of those long-term vision people, then stick to your strategy, right? He supports that mindset, by the way. That was kind of reassuring, I guess, to hear, right? But not everyone is so zen, especially after a night like that. So for those of us kind of looking for immediate direction, hello, that was me when I watched my portfolio yo-yo, right? 𝗗𝗃𝗃 broke down what he is doing. He actually gave another nod to another analyst that I follow for many years. That's 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗍𝗃, by the way, who managed to sell around $2.70 to $2.80, essentially nailing the local top. And now those folk, at least who sold high, are watching the price hover around $2.50, $2.60, and probably feeling a bit like a genius. Now, 𝗗𝗃𝗃 acknowledged that, and he suggested that if someone did want to sell now after this drop, it wouldn't be a terrible idea if it helps them sleep at night. At these levels, selling would only mean minor losses, and it could save you from the stress of possibly seeing another big dive. Sounds almost sensible, right? But here is the kicker. He also made it clear that this is not what he is doing. 𝗗𝗃𝗃's own plan, unchanged, right? He's holding firm, dip or no dip, right? Because his strategy remains intact despite the scary drop that we've seen. So when I read that, I kind of grounded me a little bit. I was like, okay, so here's an experienced analyst validating both the feelings, right? Saying, hey, it's okay if you want out of the project, or at least to protect yourselves, but I'm personally staying in this for the bigger picture. Now that gave me pause and a little bit of comfort, right? It's not just blind optimism here or panic. It's actually calculated choice. Now, 𝗗𝗃𝗃 also dove into some of the technical analysis, and this part kind of got my attention. He talked about something called a descending broadening wedge. It sounds a little fancy, I know. It's kind of like wrestling move or some kind of weird yoga pose, it sounds like. But basically, it's a chart pattern where the trading range is widening over time in a downward sloping manner. So picture a megaphone kind of tipped downwards then, right? With the price bouncing between the widening walls. Now, typically, assets that form this particular pattern have a tendency to break upwards more often than not, even though it is descending. Now, 𝗗𝗗𝗀 had been tracking this wedge pattern on XRP for a little while, and he admitted something pretty humbling. He actually underestimated how low that it could go, and it cost him just a bit. Now, he confessed that he kind of doubted that the wedge would fill its lower section, meaning that he didn't think XRP would fall as far as it did. And because of that, he kept a leverage position open and got liquidated at $1.35. Ouch. Now, according to him, that mistake cost him a few $1,000s, and 𝗗𝗀𝗀 was very candid about it. He made a point that, at least to mention that he's not an advocate for leverage trading at all. In fact, he warned everyone to avoid taking excessive risks like that. And I really respected the transparency there, even though the pros can get it wrecked, from time to time, if they've kind of been overconfident with the leverage. This is something that I talk about all the time, right? It's kind of a sobering reminder that if you're an experienced trader can misjudge the market's drop, then us regular people can definitely need to be careful not to over leverage. Personally, I never go anything excess of 10x leverage. It seems crazy that I see these slips out there with things like 50x or 100x or 300x leverage. It's just mind-bending risk gambling on a market. So, what is this wedge telling us now that XRP has filled its lower range? Well, according to 𝗗𝗀𝗀, this descending broadening wedge pattern gives XRP about a 57% probability of breaking upwards from here, and a 43% chance of moving even lower. So essentially, it's slightly better than the coin flip in favor of a bullish breakout. Hey, I'm going to take those odds, right? 57% beats 43%, right? Well, it's not guaranteed, of course, by any means, but it is tilted my mindset to a little bit more of the optimistic side. From that statistic, 𝗗𝗀𝗀 laid out two different scenarios, right? Almost like choose your own adventure options, right? Scenario one, you're in the cautious camp thinking that this could get uglier before it gets any better. And in that case, he noted that it wouldn't be wrong to reduce your position now or potentially buy back later at around 50 cents if the market really does tank. And yes, he literally mentioned the possibility of re-entering at around 50 cents in the bearish scenario. So when I first heard that, my jaw dropped, right? 50 cents is way down from where we are here. But after seeing $1.53 or $1.25 on Binance happen overnight, I realized that nothing is completely off the table in the world of crypto. The idea here is that if you truly believe that there's another massive drop coming, then you could cash out now, take a small loss, and be ready to scoop up cheap XRP if the event of the worst case plunge. It's a play it safe, capital preservative kind of approach. Scenario 2. You're firmly bullish, which, let's be honest, most of us XRP holders are at heart. In that case, the strategy is to hold on to your XRP and maybe even plan where you would take some profits on a big upswing. Now, 𝗗𝗀𝗀 points to roughly the $9 level as a potential target for taking profits. Why $9? Well, it's because if XRP does break upwards out of this wedge, well, the measured move, which is a technical way to project price targets from the chart pattern, suggests around $9 as the destination. So in other words, that's the height of the wedge projected upwards. When I read that, I kind of got excited because $9 is a big leap from where we are right now. It's about a 3x to 4x higher than the current prices. And funnily enough, $9 also lines up with some other analysts that I have seen floating around some targets. So it's not a kind of totally outlandish number either. Now, at this point, I'm weighing my options. Worst case, maybe I could buy back in at much lower prices if a doom scenario hits. Best case, I hunker down and ride a wave to $9 and beyond. But which outcome is more likely? Well, it's 57% versus 43%. That was the statistic stuck in my head. So it was still unclear what I should do, and I needed more insight. And this is where eGrag took a step back and looked at the bigger picture. And I'm so glad that he did, because it completely reframed things for me. Now, before I continue, let me just put a crucial disclaimer out there in case it isn't obvious to any of you guys. But this might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile, and you could lose all of the money that you invest. Always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. Your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Alright, so back to the story. eGrag basically said, let's zoom out. He compared this market cycle to the last one, and this point really kind of blew my mind. During the 2017-2021 cycle, XRP skyrocketed about 1,700% from its low to its peak of around $1.96. And that, happened while XRP was under the huge weight of the SEC lawsuit. There was all that legal uncertainty, which was a dark cloud over XRP's head, yet it still pulled in a 17x that cycle. Fast forward to the current cycle, 2022 to 2025 so far, XRP has risen roughly 1,160% from its low. It's not too shabby. That's about an 11.6x increase. But eGrag points is that it's still got a lot less than what we've achieved in the previous bullish cycles. So he finds it hard to believe that XRP would underperform the last cycle by such a large margin. Right? We're talking about 540% difference, especially given that the landscape now is more favorable for XRP. So let's think about it. Right? The SEC lawsuit is finally over. We've got more regulatory clarity around XRP in various different regions. And there's even talk of spot XRP ETFs potentially coming to the market. These are narrative tailwinds that XRP simply didn't have in 2021. So in eGrag's view, it doesn't make a lot of sense for XRP to fizzle out with a weaker performance this time around. If XRP were to match that previous 1,700% run, then we'd be looking roughly $5.20 as a peak this cycle. In fact, eGrag specifically predicted something like that. He mentioned around $5.20 as a technical target if history repeats. And said he plans to kind of take a small portion of profit at around $5 just to kind of test the waters, in case $5 ends up being a resistance point. But here's the exciting part. He doesn't think $5 is the end, not at all. He actually is very bullish beyond that. eGrag is forecasting a minimum of $9 for this cycle top, with an average optimistic target of around $20 and possibly a blow-off top as high as $27 if things really do get crazy. And yes, you heard that right, $27. So when I saw that, I had to double check to make sure that it wasn't a typo, right? That would actually be a pretty insane return. So I mean, even $9 would be amazing from today's perspective, let alone $20 or $27. Now, to be clear, those are just one analyst's projections. They are not guarantees, right? eGrag isn't claiming it's 100% certainty, but he's laying out what he believes is achievable based on the data, and he's read the market's potential. Reading that, I'm not going to lie, I started daydreaming just a bit, like, who among us hasn't imagined selling a small chunk of our XRP at $20 plus, and maybe even paying off a mortgage or buying a Lambo, right? Hey, we can all fantasize a little bit. But I quickly grounded myself here, right? These are just optimistic targets, and crypto has a way of humbling people. So while $27 would be beyond incredible, I'm not planning my retirement around it just yet. Still, the key takeaway for me was that the bullish scenario for XRP isn't off of the table, not by a long shot. There are solid reasons to believe that the story isn't over, and if someone as analytical as 𝗗𝗂𝘀𝗰𝗍 sees a path forward, then it reinforces my confidence in holding on. At this point, after digesting all of 𝗗𝗂𝘀𝗀's insights, I sat back and took a deep breath. Right, here's how I decided to play this. I didn't sell. In fact, I'm still holding every single XRP I had before the crash. Right? I even grabbed a little bit more around that kind of $1.50, $1.60 range when it dipped down there because, hey, sales like that don't come around very often. But that's just me. Importantly, this whole episode made me double check my own kind of preparedness. One big lesson from last night was about being ready for absolutely anything. Right? For example, did you notice how some exchanges struggled or even temporarily went down during the chaos? Well, it happens more often than you might think when markets get super volatile. Exchanges can get overloaded or just lock up. And if your only exchange that you have access to freezes up right when you need it the most, or at least to make a move, well, you're going to be stuck. And that's why I have a rule. Always have multiple exchanges set up and ready to go as a backup. And I cannot stress this enough. I've made sure to sign up, do KYC verification, and test out several exchanges that I trust. Basically, I have plan A, plan B, plan C for trading. So if exchange A has issues, I can quickly jump over to exchange B or C. Right? You never know when you're going to need that lifeline, and I sleep better knowing that I have everything set up with those alternatives. In fact, on my website, which is linked in the description down below, I've listed all of the exchanges that I personally use, and all of my affiliate links for them are there too. I only recommend platforms that I have tested with my own money, by the way. Two of my kind of go-to exchanges right now are LBank and BitGet. I use them regularly and I find them very reliable. I've got affiliate links for both of those in the description, by the way. Signing up to them will obviously help support the channel. So it's a big thank you if you do that. Obviously, it doesn't cost you anything extra. The point here is that having those accounts ready is part of my strategy. Right? I don't want to be scrambling to open up a new exchange account in the middle of a crash or when the opportunity strikes, right? So if you haven't already, consider having at least 3 or 4 different exchange accounts on standby. It's just good crypto hygiene, so to speak. Now, after this wild ride, here's my big takeaway. If you truly believe in why you actually invested in XRP in the first place, then a sudden crash, even one as gut-wrenching as the one we saw last Friday, it doesn't mean that it is game over. In fact, it can be an opportunity. Now, for me, this crash ended up being a chance to test, my conviction, do a lot of reflection and a lot more research, and come out even stronger on the other side. Yes, I'm sure it was scary. Yes, I questioned myself in the moment. Should I sell or should I cut my losses? Was I being foolish or not, right? Now, those thoughts are pretty natural. But after looking at the data, hearing from the analysts like 𝗗𝗂𝘀𝗀, and weighing the risks versus rewards, I'm more confident than ever in my decision to hold on here. And I'd even say that I'm bullish about where things can go from here. Cautiously optimistic for sure, but I'm bullish nonetheless. Of course, I'm not blind to the risks. Could XRP dip again, or kind of just languishingly be around in the lows for a little bit longer than we would like? Sure, absolutely. This is crypto after all, and anything can happen. There's that 43% chance of more downside after all. But when I weigh at least that against the 57% chance of an upside swing, and I factor in the end of the lawsuit and the potential catalyst like ETFs on the horizon, and the sheer strength of the XRP community, shout out to all of you guys keeping the faith, then I actually feel comfortable riding this out. The XRP community is known for its strong hands, and I'm proud to be among those who didn't panic sell. Right? Sometimes the moments that test you the most actually end up teaching you the best lessons. Now, this latest crash definitely tested me. It also, lit a fire underneath me to dig deeper, to stay informed, and to be even more prepared. It reminded me why I got into XRP and crypto in general, because I see a future that is worth the occasional roller coaster ride. So, whether we touch 50 cents or shoot up to $5 or even $20 in the coming months, I'm going to be sticking around for the journey. I've got my plan. I've got my community. Remember, you're welcome to join the free Discord server to discuss all of this in real time. And I've got my eyes on the long game. In the end, I believe patience and knowledge pay off in crypto. And hey, if XRP really does hit some of those high targets, then you might just see me with an unshakable grin in the future video. If it doesn't, well, we can adjust and we can keep on going. That's the way that this game is played. So, thank you for listening to my story today and the analysis. You can hit that like button, hit the subscribe button for more crypto adventures on the Cheeky Crypto channels. And, your support really does mean a lot to me and to my brother. And I just don't want you guys to be missing out, what's coming next. So I'll see you all in the next one.